Welcome to Building Great People, the podcast where we explore how leaders in business and community are shaping the future by investing in the people who make it all happen. Let's get started. All right, welcome to Building Great People. We are so excited to have Leo Millan with us as our first guest. He is a friend of mine, as well as my boss, and has over the years built an amazing business at Millan Enterprises and multiple other businesses. And so we are blessed to have him on our first podcast on Building Great People. Leo, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you touched several different companies, so maybe just kind of mention what all fields you're into.
Real estate was obviously the one I'm probably most commonly known for, but we also have a labor company that sources labor for different industries, and 𝗟𝗲. We're involved with that, along with a partner of mine, Brent Nicholson. And flooring company, and a few other smaller things that we do, but primarily in Clarksville, known for either the real estate side or 𝗟𝗲.
Yeah. So he's being a little humble. We are involved in a lot here at Millan Enterprises, and one of the reasons I get to sit here today is because of Millan Enterprises. And we started when I first arrived here. I think we had 25 people just on that side, and so I want to briefly just kind of mention that today we had a company photo, and I think I may have heard it was over 70 people was in the room for that photo.
Yeah,
does that sound right? Yep. So astounding growth that's in the past 5 years just on that one company, and then you add in the labor company, which at any one time can be from a couple hundred to 1,200, 1,300. Is that
correct? At the height, I think it was 1,500 or something like that. Working at we gauge it by the day, so we have daily reports of how many labor are working. So it fluctuates.
Yeah. So we're here and we're talking about leadership, but really one of our core focuses at Millan, and we get asked this question all the time, is how do we do it? And how did we get to this place? How did you do it, right? And they want the secret sauce, and you have a great story about the 𝗂𝗶𝗶𝗵𝗶 example. Do you mind sharing that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, there is no secret sauce is what we say. It's always the people is what I say. But if those of you that watch, I think it's the first 𝗂𝗶𝗶𝗵𝗶, when they're walking away, there's two parts to the 𝗂𝗶𝗶𝗵𝗶. The one where he's walking away with his dad, and then the dad said he's finally going to give him the secret recipe to the noodle soup he has.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the day, he's like, all right, give it to me. And then dad says, there is no secret. It's like, if people believe that it's special, it's going to be special. And then the other one was that secret scroll that everybody was fighting to get.
Yep.
And ironically, it's kids' cartoons that have some of the best analogies, where he opens it up and it's basically blank, but it's really shining on the person themselves that we can kind of determine our own destiny. You know, it's one thing I've been a big believer in.
Yeah. Well, you've done a remarkable job building what was here today, and I know you have a lot of future plans and opportunities that you're looking at to grow into. But I want to focus kind of on that past for right now, up until this point. And what do you think, outside of the secret sauce, which we all agree, I think is the people, it's us, right? It's the individuals that are sitting in the seat, making decisions and doing the work. But what do you think also adds to that success?
Consistency and passion. I don't think you can have one without the other, because we can get passionate or motivated with things, but if you're not consistent with it, it usually does not work, because people will get on a bandwagon. Right now it's the beginning of the year, so obviously a lot of the New Year's resolutions start. I interestingly ran into this thing that they actually have a National Quitters Day. Of like that people try something for a few weeks and then they just give up. So I think consistency out trumps a lot of the things, talent, smarts, money. A huge believer in that, because I'm a product of that, of like, I didn't have the resources or connections or any of the other things that some people might have, and we were still able to manage.
Yeah. Perseverance.
Correct.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said to that. And I think that applies not only to the small businesses that we work with day in and day out with commercial leasing and just our local community. And we've put a lot of effort into supporting those companies. But we see that just in a manager, right? A simple person that was great at their job and they get bumped up to this leadership role, right? And that consistency that you're talking about translates to every step along someone's leadership journey. And the leaders that I look up to are consistent. I don't have to agree with everything, but they're at least consistent on what they do. Who would you say in your life maybe modeled some of that consistency, or maybe opposite of that, who didn't model that drove you to be consistent?
Well, there's several people, and there's too many to mention that influenced my life, but some that I can think of, and I don't want to mention names, but I had a bad supervisor when I was in the military, where I learned, okay, I'm not going to be like this person. And then you meet other people like the late, John Mayer that helped mentor me. Mr. Turner's one that's consistent in their belief systems and what they do and how they treat people. Also, understanding the people that are with you. One of the things that I'm proud that I've always been able to do is like teach work ethic to the kids. Not that we have anything mastered, but a good story is Andrew, my youngest son, I made him wash dishes at a restaurant. And, he was frustrated and was saying like, hey, why do I need to wash dishes? And my answer was like, well, you're going to understand people. If you ever want to lead people, you have to understand how they feel, how hard the work is, and then you'll be able to lead anybody if you start from the bottom up. Yeah,
I love that. A lot of that journey is they have to get in and be dirty first, right, and be messy with what life is going on at every level. And I think you have seen that with all your children. You've kind of modeled that, and I think that then transfers over to the companies you've built, where a lot of your leaders have started internally kind of doing some of that messy work, some of that hard work that you knew, hey, you have to start from that bottom and kind of build yourself up.
Yeah, because a lot of people see obviously where myself and Lily are at now, and they think, like must be nice or whatever the thought process is, but they don't see the struggle. That's the other thing that people don't really talk about in business. It's like, it's not an easy road. Anything worthwhile is usually going to be pretty hard and have to have the stomach for it,
Yeah.
Not a lot of glory that goes with it, but when you have the wins, it does feel good. But it's a lot of long nights, sleepless nights at times, and it is a struggle, and then the more success that you want, I think the more the struggle it's going to take. I think heard a quote saying nothing worthwhile is going to be downhill. It's going to be really, really hard uphill battle.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of that journey for y'all, there's this moment in time where there's only so much you can do, or you and Lily can do, right? Correct. And you had to start relying on people to help carry that vision forward. And so I kind of want to touch on that of, when was that moment for you where you said, hey, I got to get help here, and I got to start trusting someone to help with this?
Yeah. That's a great question. I guess you can't pinpoint the exact moment, but it became clear that it's like, I think there's more here, but we can't do it alone, and we have to trust people, which is one of the hardest things to do, especially with the Millan stuff, because we birthed this from the beginning. It was passion. It was like something that I super believed in. It was hard, and then as you're turning stuff over, it's super, super complicated, because you don't think anybody's going to have as much passion for it as you, but you have to let go in order to grow. Exact time, I wouldn't know. I think it just, for me, it happened little by little, where sometimes I didn't realize I was like, oh, I'm already out of this, and still think I'm in it. But the great people that we have are already taking care of it.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable process. And I imagine there's someone listening to this trying to grow their business as well, and they're on that kind of cliff looking over going, man, do I jump in and let someone help me, take this to the next level, or do I exist here? And I think you probably faced that realization, whether it was a certain time period or not, where you said, hey, I can only go so far.
Correct.
And I stopped being able to grow like I want to grow. And that's a challenging spot for, I think, anyone. And that, again, translates to just a normal manager, right? Like, a manager can only lead so many people before they got to figure out, how do I delegate? And I think delegation, trust, communication, those are all things we talk about.
Clarity, which is not one of my strengths. This is one that we're trying to improve on, because if they're not clear on what you're delegating, it hurts. And then a lot of these, I'm not saying I got figured out. It's the stuff I'm working on. So
those clarity, not only on the task, but what the expectation is, I think is pretty important too. Correct. And especially when you're working with something that's very close to your heart, something that you all built, translating that, I imagine, sometimes is a challenge of what you expect from your team. And I think you've done a great job of doing that. And I know you mentioned some things you're working on. So one of the things I do know that you work on and you struggle with sometimes is that communication with conflict. And if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of hear your heart behind that, because I know you personally, and I know you care so much about people that when it comes to conflict, sometimes that's a challenge. But as it is something you are working on, how do you see that as important in your leadership abilities? What
I've seen that I've learned just in the last few years is sometimes avoiding a tough conversation, conflict, however you want to look at it. Sometimes you're thinking it's like, well, I don't want to hurt the person, or how are they going to take it? My personality type, based on, those tests we take, it's like, I want everybody to be happy and get along is really the big picture. And obviously tough conversations aren't going to be up my alley, but in saying that, when I avoid the conversations or prolong a conversation that needs to happen, you probably end up hurting the individual on the other side more than help. You're really only helping yourself in avoiding that conversation. And I think in the past, we've hurt people from moving on. Using an example of somebody that might not be in the right position or is not performing. I have the tendency of just kind of saying, well, just work itself out, which when you're smaller, it's a little bit better, but sometimes a whole team can get affected by not making a change or addressing it, and then not giving that individual an opportunity to move on to somewhere else that they might be happy. Because in our organization, we're growing, we do things different. No one organization is perfect for everybody. I've heard people say, if they say, hey, we got to figure it out, this is perfect, if you don't like it, you're all jacked up, that's a cult, right? You need to move on from that place. So most organizations that are doing well are always trying to evolve, and I think that's one where we're doing a better job now than we did before with the people aspect of, like, either moving people on, putting them in the right seat on the bus, as we have that term, or just saying, like, hey man, you might be better off in another organization where you might flourish. Again, going back to what I said earlier, you think you're hurting somebody, but you're probably holding them back sometimes. That's because our organization is run differently. Like, my leadership style, and you can probably correct me here if I'm wrong, is more like, I was asked actually yesterday, we had that Leadership Middle Tennessee event of how we get really good people. And I said, well, we hire good people to tell us what to do, not the other way around, right? Because the type of people that I'm gravitated towards are the people that bring me the ideas, plans, and then they execute. If people are waiting for me to give them a game plan and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Obviously, I have big picture stuff, but to get into the weeds and details, if people are going to want in that, they're probably not a good fit to work with myself. Yeah. And I imagine that's shifted over time. We've used this terminology before. We kind of acted like a startup, for several years. And probably more recently, that shift has happened. And I think that, again, is happening at different teams. You're on a team and that team's new, or you got a bunch of new people on your staff, and you're trying to figure out, how do I get planted in a more formalized, organized fashion? Sometimes those people struggle to fit into that new puzzle, right? Correct. And that creates some conflict. And I know you've seen that play out. How do you think we should handle that? Someone should handle that. What's some advice you would give? if you're a maybe communicator like myself, the way I handle it is obviously I believe we have the best people in Clarksville working with us. So the way I would handle it is like, okay, that's not my strength, So I'm blessed to have somebody like Mayor Dirt that's with us, to where I would be like, hey, like, not to say like you handled it, but he would do a better job than myself on handling it. And I know it sounds like I'm just punning or kicking the can down the road, but he's going to do a better job. You're going to do a better job than if I try to embed myself. And so sometimes pulling away is doing more. I know that maybe not make sense, but I feel like sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
If I'm too involved, if I'm worried about if the trash is getting taken out, if the smaller details, I'm not letting people do their job.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I think as a leader, one of those things we're taught growing up is that we need to be perfect at everything. And I think the sooner you can become self-aware, like you have become, of your weaknesses, that it's almost better to invest in the things you're great at and stop spinning your wheels on stuff that you're just not great at. So you find people that can fill those holes that you struggle with and let them be great at it. Like you said, take the chains off, let them run, right?
Correct. Like accounting, I always use as an example of like, if you sat me in a room and I had to crunch numbers all day, I'd probably be miserable and I'd fail, right?
Yeah.
So I'm in the right spot for me, and that's what we want for other people. But at the same time, that's why I believe we have a robust accounting department at Millan, because you have to have trust. You have to have the ability for them to do the work, and the people that are there right now is a great team. I believe we have, and it helps me sleep at night.
Yeah.
if knowing that we have those trustworthy people.
Well, and you said something earlier today to me as we were preparing for this, just talking about when someone leaves our company, there's really only two reasons that we want them to leave. And one of them, is why. That's the first question. Mm-hmm. But I think the first thing that we don't want someone to leave because we failed them.
Correct.
And that's putting people first. If we're not doing the things that we're talking about, then that's on us. And so we want to come to the table if someone's leaving and be like, did we do everything to make sure this person was the right fit and they're taken care of? And, I'm excited when someone says they're leaving and it's for an opportunity I couldn't give them.
Correct.
But I'm also super sad.
Those are the situations that suck, because I see everybody that puts in a 2-week notice as you've heard me say this probably, is like they just fired us. Mm-hmm. Like, sometimes people will default. It's easy. The human nature says, well, they didn't like it here. Too bad. So sad. Like, let them move on. I take it, I think I take it personal. Yep. And it's like, well, they just fired us is really what happens. Most people don't, as leaders, don't like to look at it that way. But if you wanted somebody to stay and they're leaving, they're firing you. There's no other way to put it. So usually what happens is maybe they weren't the right fit, the negative things, right? You didn't give them opportunity, which I know has happened with us. We have the ability to focus on our weaknesses. We have them. And one of ours has been in the past that we were growing too fast to where somebody might not have the opportunities. We'll blame them to say, well, they weren't patient. Well, sometimes it's our fault that we didn't give them the opportunity. But the ones that are good stories are the ones that, hey, they started here and now they have an opportunity to manage their own portfolio or work for a bigger management company. They move. Military spouses, as you know, are great when they move on and then they move to another state, but they don't get an entry-level job. They get a management job. Those are the feel-good stories. Yeah.
And not to talk about something a little bit more uncomfortable, but those times when someone is leaving and their reason, or we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but when we sit on that sideline and kind of like, it's not so bad that they're leaving. And I know that's a little bit uncomfortable, but I think leaders need to hear this, that we don't need to be in that spot where we're just kind of like, oh, it's okay if they're leaving, because that's
a problem. Yeah, there was a problem before. Two things that bother me the most, and I think is that when they say, well, this person's leaving. Good thing they're leaving. To me, that's not like a relief. That's like, well, that's a problem on the leadership because that person didn't get the opportunity, they didn't get their proper training, or they didn't belong in an organization to begin with. And the one that's worse is like, well, we're just not going to fill that spot. Right. Yeah. It's like, well, what was that person? Was that person not adding value? Because if people aren't adding value, not because you need a revenue, but it's like that person's probably not being fulfilled. You know, we all need the satisfaction of having needed fulfillment in one's duties. You know, it feels good to be needed, wanted, that you accomplish something. And if you're not providing that, that's not the answer to say we're not going to fill that slot.
That's right. And I think, you know, there's an important distinction between companies that I hope our listeners kind of take away from this. There are businesses that exist and they operate as a status quo. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but that's where you get into that trap for the two reasons you just said. Someone's working here and it's kind of like, you know, if they're here, they're here. If they're not, they're not. But there's this other side that, you know, if you're listening to this, I would believe that you are probably one that is a go-getter. You're trying to make change. You're trying to do big things. You're persevering through some difficult things. That side looks at those two reasons you just gave of never wanting to be falling into that trap and go, I refuse to let that happen.
Correct.
And you need to be lean and you need to be holding your teams accountable. You need to hold yourself accountable. They need to hold you accountable. You've talked about that. You know, my team holds me accountable. But the fact remains, you know, we can only be as good as our people that are beneath us. And if we're not providing those opportunities, then we have let down those teams. And the companies that I see growing, especially in tough markets, which we all look around, we all can say we're in tough markets. You know, the ones that still are able to persevere are the ones who are taking a hard look at their teams and going, hey, like, who wants to be here? And are we giving them what they need to be successful?
Correct. And sometimes it's not resources or money or the biggest company that gets ahead. It's a proven concept of like the hungrier somebody is, sometimes those are the ones that come out ahead. We just saw it with that AI company out of China that basically disrupted the whole stock market because they came out basically with a similar product. The average age of their people doing it only had a few years out of college experience, and they didn't have all these expensive chips that we quote have the corner on in the U.S. and they're doing it at a fraction of the cost. Yeah.
Back to perseverance, right? When you're hungry, you figure it out. But if you had status quo, then that would have never happened.
It would say like, hey, we can't compete. We can't even get the chips, right? That's the answer. And sometimes that's the thing that sometimes bother me, the no. As you know, in 𝗟𝗲𝗏 with us, military has the same too. The answer is not no. You're not allowed to say no. It's like, how do we get to a yes? Is really the answer.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of sitting with you in a lot of those meetings when you're talking with business people and meeting some very successful men and women in industry. And one of the number one things I'll walk away with, and maybe there is one secret sauce here, if we can walk away with, and that is the answer is yes. And it's while the room that you're sitting in may say we can't do something or we don't know how to do it, when you stand up and say yes and you take that risk, that's when really cool stuff happens, and that's when innovation happens, and that's when the returns of all your hard work happens.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy, like him or not, real controversial sometimes, but the guy taking us to Mars is not a rocket engineer.
That's right. Yeah.
He's just a guy that's just relentless, and real tenacious, and we're going to get to Mars. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Based on his past performances in his other businesses.
I don't think he's going to give up. That's for sure. Yeah. I want to go back to a little bit about the delegation part. We talk about this 80-20% rule. And I know you've used this before. As you have passed on, some of your job duties, because essentially you did everything at Millan, at least for a long time. What is that 80-20 rule? Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's basically if nobody ever, whether you're right or wrong, like me and probably my case, I'm probably wrong a lot of the times, but you would think like, well, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to do it to the quality of the way I would. Mm. But if they can get to 80% of the way I would do it, and it frees up my time, it's a win in my opinion, because then you can allocate your time for other things.
That's right.
One of the things I've learned lately, we grew up, I think, my backstory, there's a saying where we grow up that says, I have more time than money. Basically, in California, they have these weird rules where if you owed parking tickets or whatever, you could go spend the weekend in jail and then they'd offset the cost. So it's like, if you owed $2,000, you could go spend a weekend in jail and then they'd waive the $2,000. Well, that's where the term for us came from, where I have more time than money, because you can't make $2,000 in a weekend, so you might as well do it. As you get older and you get into business, it kind of, you realize how much valuable the time is. That's one thing I've realized of I don't want to get bogged down. Not that it's meaningless work, but you're also taking work from somebody else that could be doing it, and you could be using that energy for something else. Because as I'm in my 50s now, and I realize how fast time has gone, and I need to allocate it as best as I can.
Yeah. And there's something special about you. I would say to the audience listening, if you haven't ever had a chance to meet Leo, and I hope one day we'll have a book or something just on your life. It's pretty remarkable. But one of the things that has stuck with me is there's no one who's going to outwork you. And not that you go around saying that, but you truly are willing to do anything you've asked anyone else to do. And there's a lot to be said to that. And I think for our younger listeners in their leadership roles or their journey in leadership, or even leading your family, right? Like that's an important part of this. It doesn't stop when you get home.
Correct.
And I think there's a lot of, if you're splitting your values that you have at work with your home life, you're going to fail. You can't serve those two masters.
Correct.
And so talk to us a little bit about, for someone younger in their journey of leadership, how do you blend that? That's
a podcast in itself, I believe, because I think these type of things, podcasts and social media, has distorted I believe in a balance, but it comes at different times. Mm-hmm. I've never, and this sounds self-serving, obviously, when you're talking as a company, I have yet to meet one person that says, hey, when I was 18, I started at this job. I went in at 9 o'clock, punched in. At 11 o'clock, I took my hour lunch, came back, punched in, and at 4 o'clock, I was gone, and I'm out, and I showed up the next day. There might be a way, but I've yet to find that guy. When I do, I'll let you know, unless it's a day trader or somebody. I just don't. I don't believe in the hacks, as a generation calls it. Old school is the way I was taught. That I'm sure there's other ways, but the path that I saw that was more consistent, was just work hard. And there was times where it was 18 hours a day. There's times where it's 2 hours. But the thing is, there's an imbalance to get to success. And you have to manage it. The way I managed it is one of the best compliments that I get is our family unit, how close we are together is what I'm proud of probably the most, but gets at least recognition. Well, that was intentional, because we hang out with our kids and they're adults. And I've had several people say, man, I wish I want to hang out with my kids like that. And I say, well, that starts when they're 6. That doesn't start. I see people that worked really, really hard and was gone a lot, and some of it you can't control. Military, certain jobs you can't control, but you can to an extent. Like I never had hunting trips, fishing trips. Nothing wrong with them. I enjoy doing all of it, but I had dedicated so much time to work. My thing was going to be family, work, and if I'm in town, we would never miss church. Not that church makes it any better, but again, you're going to be,
it's a core value.
You've heard me say this a million times, is you're going to be the sum of the 5 people you're around. Huge believer in that. So if you're around people that you don't want to be like, or respect, you're wasting your time. So I was intentional about saying, like, I enjoy work so much. That's the other thing we can get into about passions. And if you love what you do, you're never going to work a day in your life. So I didn't need a hobby. My hobby is coming into work, spending time with the group, talking to everybody, see them success. That's what makes me happy. And then the same with my family, spending time with them. So I didn't need to fill any voids of like, well, I need a getaway. I need to go have a drink. I need to have this, or I need alone time. So ours was family, work, church life.
Yeah. Yeah. Being authentic through every aspect of your life is really critical. And not to say you were perfect back then and you're not perfect now.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying we got it figured out. I just was, church is a good example. People say, I don't want to go to church with a bunch of hypocrites. It's like, well, I'm going to church for no other reason that if you're sick, you're going to go to a hospital, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like hospitals are there to help. And I see the same with churches. There's great churches, there's not so great churches, but we feel blessed that in Clarksville, there's a lot of good churches that people can attend, and we're blessed to have found one.
Yeah. Just the intentionality of your life, I think, speaks to when I talk to younger leaders, just that emphasis of it can't stop when you walk out the door. And if it's a job to you, it's not the right one.
Correct.
And you really got to make it a lifestyle. And when I say that, I don't mean like, oh, I'm creating this social media lifestyle image of myself. It's no, I just truly believe and care for the people that I'm working with or the thing that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Whether you're by yourself as a real estate agent or you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, if you're not authentic in your lifestyle of caring for the people there, I don't believe long-term success is probably on your cards.
If you're not waking, I don't use I think you know this, I don't use an alarm clock unless I have a early flight or something. I naturally get up. Sometimes it's really early, sometimes not as early, but I get up with excitement of like what's going to go on in the day. Is it always rosy? No. There's obviously struggles, but I think the success has come because of the struggle. So not that I embrace the struggle, but when something is going bad, my mindset is not like go hunker down and go take a nap. It's like, oh, I need to address this and something good's going to come out of it. And that's how you have to have the mentality. Yeah,
I agree completely. And I think for those who may be in that funk, I would say some of this is learned. It's not something you wake up some days and you're like, oh, this is perfect and I love every aspect of it. And you do have to persevere. And I think that goes back to you're the sum of the 5 people you're hanging around. And so
huge believer in that.
Yeah. If you're around, good people, and I think each person has to define what that looks like for them a little bit. Yeah. But shared values and shared vision, those people, when it is a struggle day, because you have struggle days, it makes it a lot easier. And they motivate you, keep you going. And I know Lily for you is one of those people. She doesn't let you give up. Yeah. And as much as I know, there's definitely been days in your journey that the real estate world can be pretty brutal.
Those of us that are older that went through the recession, and I'm glad you bring that up, because having a support system to include family, right? Yep. Because it's a running joke in my family, because I used to answer the phone for the carpet cleaning, and to this day, if I snap my fingers like this, kids know to be quiet, because I'm going to answer the phone professionally. And again, it just goes back to the intentional of like, I'm going to be the best that I can, not be sloppy, not that we have it figured out, but having the support system. And Lily's always been really good of like telling me the truth, having those personality types that say, you messed up, but put on your big boy pants and like, let's go back at it, versus again, we've had deals that don't go well and she done beat me down and say, ladies, and you're raising a family, you want security. Yeah. Most ladies would tend to agree with this, that, if your husband's over here risking everything, it's a hard pill to swallow. And she was a great sport of saying, hey, I believe in you. That gives you like so much confidence of having your family behind you that you know is not going to beat up on you if something goes bad. That just goes the same as a leader with your group. That's one of the hard things to deal with. When something goes bad, it's easy as a leader to point it out. And again, full disclosure, I'm not the best at this because of the first thing most of us want to do is lash out, right? And reprimand or be negative about it. But to say like, hey, what I learned this term yesterday from Colonel Salam, you can just ask the question, what did we learn from this?
Yeah.
and ask the question and see how it can be improved versus, hey, like, you dummy, why'd you do this? Like, I would have done it different, versus being supportive.
Yeah. Ernest Hemingway has a great quote, and I'll probably butcher it a little bit, but it says 2 years to learn to speak and 60 years to learn to be silent. And I think there's a lot of truth in that as in my own leadership journey, I have found more times than not, the quicker I am to judge or address a situation without trying to take a moment to pause and process it, the quicker I usually failed. And in that time of pause, you can't be too long. There's a trick there. There's a balance. But it gets you a lot further. And I think you have probably experienced that in so many different ways. Just the pause, that intentional pause, is a great tool in trying to overcome obstacles and challenges or accountability for people.
Yeah. Or a pause or bouncing it off somebody that's not going to get the message out. So you're really good about if I like see something, I'll bounce it off you and then before, or Lily or somebody. And then that way you can at least have a day before you execute. Yeah. Carol that works with us is really good because she's told me in the past, it's like, I wrote this long email and then I held it for the night and then the next day it becomes a lot shorter or it's gone, right? Yeah. That's something that we can all learn from. But again, that just comes from probably years of
mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some painful ones.
Yeah. For me. Yeah. Because I think most of the time when I either lash out immediately, for me, it's almost like God's telling me, why'd you do that again? Because it's going to happen every time. Yeah. I'm usually wrong and there's more to the story or I didn't get the whole picture. So it's usually better to take a couple breaths, be in the right mind and then address the situation.
Yeah. I love that. Well, last thing I kind of want to end on for our listeners is you have this unique way, and I think it's very unique to you and Millan Enterprises, of what I call getting people on the bus. I think you mentioned it earlier, but I think it happens a lot where you do have this focus on people, and sometimes people over even the job, and sometimes that can run with a friction with what the job actually needs. But talk a little bit more about that. I'd like to end on that note.
I'm big on relationships, and I've said this a million times, and maybe for the people that haven't heard it, sometimes I usually go back to revert to where people ask me questions, and one of them is always like, how do you maintain all these relationships, right? It's like, it's not like I have a Rolodex of people for certain things. The answer is really, they're genuine. And I'll say this till the day I die. If I like you, I'm going to build that relationship. And if you happen to sell drywall and I need it, it works out great. Yeah. I think a lot of people see, let's just say someone like you, and they think immediately, what can I get out of him? Versus the value add. And then one of the things that I emphasize with people is like, you be that value to the people. I've been fortunate to be around people that are either, considered super popular or super rich. And for some reason they gravitate, and then I build relationships with them and people are like, well, how'd you do that? And it's like, it was genuine. It wasn't like, well, what am I going to get out of it? Right. If you meet somebody famous and you're constantly asking them for stuff, they're usually in that scenario all the time versus like, hey, let me help you out. Let me do this for you. And it's genuine, right? If some of the stories, I've met some pretty famous people that I have zero connection with, and I don't even bother with it. Yeah. Like I don't pursue the relationship. But there's other people that I've known in this town for 30 years that if they call me and they need something, I'll be there for them because it's genuine, and the money and the other stuff happens organically. Yeah, and that's usually the hardest thing to sell because people would be like, okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
But what really is it? And it's like, no, it's really the case. You know, I mean, we're on this podcast. I don't think there's one time I've sat our accounting team and said, all right, what are our margins this month for profit? It's usually what can we fix? What can we do better? And that stuff takes care of itself.
Yeah, I love that. There's one last thing I want you to tell you. You had said if it all fails, you would walk down and do something. Do you remember what that is? Yeah,
you know, I'm a risk taker for saying. And a couple of people have asked because I've been all in a lot. That again, when you're passionate, you're going to burn some bridges. You're going to one thing that, you know, I can say it's probably not true, especially at my age now. But my mentality was like, I can outwork anybody. I'll work 18 hours. My family's not going to starve. And several people have asked me, but one in particular, I think maybe Ariana asked me, my daughter, like, what would happen if you failed? I said, I would just walk diagonally across the street to Jack Turner's office and ask him for a job. And I'd tell him I'd work for free for couple months and I'm going to find something to do. Yeah. Right. That's just where the confidence comes in. And it's not cockiness. It's confidence that I can pretty much outwork somebody. And if I can't, I'm going to be pretty close. Yeah. Yeah. And I think to just kind of end on that note, to the listeners out there, there's so many nuggets of information with Leo, and thank you for coming on, kind of kicking this off with us with the Building Great People podcast. But to our leaders and those on that journey of leadership, our business owners, I would say a lot of things, but some of the things that I think stand out to me is, you know, bet on yourself. I think that's actually, like if you don't trust yourself, no one knows you better than you, right? That's right. Like, who are you? I know you're ending, but like, who are you when the phone's off, when you're alone, right? Nobody knows you. That man in the mirror type of deal. Like, can you go to bed and say, I was honest with myself? Because, you know, we lie to ourselves more than we lie to anybody else, right? And if you try to be honest with yourself, usually things work out a lot better. Yeah. That's why we don't like silence. Correct. Yeah. Again, trying to work on it myself. So not claiming I have it figured out, but hopefully I have the formula. Yeah. Well, my encouragement is if you don't have 5 people in your corner that you're hanging out with, spending time with, that have the same values of you, find those people, surround yourself with those people. If you are a different person when you walk home than you are at work, I would encourage you to align those two. Find out what your values are, what's important to your soul, feed that, because that's going to lead to genuine relationships, which ultimately is what this is about. And big proponent of that in the leadership journey. It's about relationships. Some of us are naturally great at it, others aren't, and that's okay, but we can all work on those different things. So I hope you'll join us in this journey. I think we got some more podcasts coming out of this, just on some topics that you mentioned. I love the family aspect, because I think that is such a challenge. Yeah. Because people think you have to have one or the other, and you truly can have both. They just come at different times. Yeah, I agree completely. And so thanks for joining us, and hope you'll join us next time. That's it for today's episode of Building Great People. Every leader has the power to shape the future by investing in and developing the people they lead. Keep leading with purpose, growing with heart, and empowering those around you. Strive to be the leader who elevates others, and together we'll continue building a better world. See you next time.